The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
And yes, we are certainly born to be alive. You're listening to Until Now with Rosie Pekar, where we talk to ordinary people with extraordinary experiences. And I guess today being an important day in the US, everyone's sitting on the edge of their seats, or those that are still bothered to give a damn are sitting on the edge of their seats to find out whether they're born to be alive or what's going to come about. But anyway, my guest today is all about all things wonderful for us as human beings in order to ease depression, grief, overwhelmment, which may be a state of affairs that's about to hit the world globally or en masse very shortly. I'd like to welcome Morry Zelcovitch, the world's best brain entrainment engineer.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate being here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm glad to be able to talk to you, Morry, because you've got so much that is really of tremendous value. Now, there be listeners that aren't too well acquainted with me, and because I'm new in this program, and my background is 16 years in law enforcement and investigation. So, and I moved from that into motivational speaking and have written, 4 or 5 inspirational motivational books and traveled the globe and teaching people how to get back up after they fall down, overcoming adversity, dealing with challenges. However, I've discovered over the many, many years, I prefer things to be easy rather than hard. And those that are like me that like to be lazy and get the most from the least are going to love what we have to share, especially with you today, and especially those that are chronic pain sufferers, have sleepless nights, maybe they haven't had previously, but as I said, again, environments and state of affairs are always changing, and we never know what tomorrow is going to bring or what's going to happen in our lives and circumstances. So when we've got a tool to aid and assist us in order to live more fully and freely, that's something I want to share with people. And that is what you are the master of.
Well, that's very kind of you. I don't really have to say anything now.
No, yes, you do, Morry, because I met you. Well, I haven't physically met you. Like, I'm here in Australia. Those that are listening have probably worked out from the Australian accent, and they probably think you're another Aussie, though you're a Canadian.
Yes.
And we're talking. I'm at 12 o'clock midday. You're at 9 p.m., same as the eastern side of the US, matching them. But we also have other listeners I'm aware of from India and other locations. And if you want to join in the chat, go to W4CY Radio and join the chat live. You might have some questions you want to throw to Morry, especially to do with having less pain within your life and sleep-filled nights. And for me, I met you virtually, I'd say about a decade ago now, if not longer, and you shared with me at that time some powerful brain entrainment programs that I was able to successfully use for myself. So I personally vouch for you and your material, because I was, like many people, you have experiences in life that knock you for 6, and you might have a series of them all at one time, and it becomes too overwhelming. There's the grief of losing loved ones. There's also, the challenge of when you have to deal with financial issues, and I had a lot happen all at the one occasion, And I couldn't wrap my brain around it, even though I work in motivation and inspiration, and people, see me as, oh, wow, you deal so well with all of life's challenges and events. I'm like every other human being. I got knocked for 6 and I was pulling the covers up over my head, and I thought, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't know how to deal with anything anymore. I've had enough. And that's where you stepped in with these products. So I'd like to share a little bit for our listeners before we get to what it is that you actually created that works so well, what your background is and how you came upon this
Sure.
in brain entrainment.
Not a problem. Actually, it was lots of problems, at least things that I defined as problems. And that was
Yes.
perhaps my biggest mistake of them all, quite frankly.
Yes.
I'm almost 55 years old now, and I'd say the first 35 years of my life in extreme depression. I used to wake up every morning and look out my window, and just before I looked out my window, I'd have my fingers crossed that I would see mushroom clouds.
Wow.
So I wasn't afraid that I was going to see. The traditional thing is
Yeah.
we're all afraid of seeing this stuff. I wasn't afraid to see it. I was afraid not to see it because that's how dark and bleak life was for me. I hated people. I hated God forbid you should smile around me. You'd become
Yes.
my number one enemy because why are you smiling? Why do you have a right to be happier than me? Well, happier than I am is kind of silly. It's an oxymoron because I wasn't happy at all.
And
I heard,
unfortunately, you won't be alone in that feeling state, because I traveled
yeah,
recently in the US and I commented from Boston and New York and across many places. There were a lot of people with that hair trigger response, quick to react with a negative state of energy. So there'll
yes.
be many listeners keen to hear what you have to share here.
Well, basically, imagine the darkest, blackest black you can imagine, and then make it about 50,000 shades darker, and that would be where I was. I was to
So
the
not 50
point.
shades of gray,
No,
50,000
not
shades
50
of black.
Shades of Grey. They were shades of black. Although I was addicted to sex for a while, I was addicted to drugs for a while, like many whiles. I was
Yes.
addicted to a lot of bad things, actually, trying to deaden and numb the pain.
Well,
Because,
they're not necessarily bad. It depends on how you use those things. I don't want to
yeah,
put sex
that's true. Sex is
bad.
not a bad thing. The way I was using it, it was a horrible thing.
Exactly. It's sort of like I tell my son, it's like fire. It's not good or bad. It's how you use it. You can use it to warm a person or you can use it to burn a person. It's your use of the thing.
That's it exactly, and it's how you interpret what happens around you. One of the things that I learned from my massive hatred of the universe and life and everything, and 5 that I can remember suicide attempts, but I'm sure there were more in there,
Wow.
and a myriad of broken bones and dislocations and other things. So I think when I realized I couldn't kill myself, I thought, well, at least I can hurt myself. That was
So
something I was pretty good at.
can I just ask, what was your predominant thought at that time? You describe it in colors of being black, but if you had a repeated thought that was running through your head, what would that thought have been?
Why?
As in, why
Just
me?
not necessarily why me, just why am I here? I mean, the classic thing is, my parents would ask me why I'm acting out or acting up, or being an A. I don't
Yeah,
know if I
yep,
swear on this
yeah,
station, so I'll be
yep,
careful.
yep.
But and I would come back with, well, show me a piece of paper where I agreed to be brought into this world, and then I'll owe you an explanation.
Okay. So
You
just
know,
a lot of anger, it sounds like. Like, I'm
it
not a
was that. Well,
psychologist and I'm not going to pretend to be, but I'm just trying to make it relatable for those listening that may be in similar states
you
if
know,
they have similar thought patterns.
most of the people I would expect, if they were anything like me anyway, wouldn't really know why they felt the way they feel.
Yeah.
And that's maybe the strongest instigator to keep you that way. When you don't understand why you feel a certain way, you are even more helpless than if you do understand. If you and I are friends, Rosemary, and you annoy me nonstop all the time, right? Then I can walk away from you and be relieved of that annoyance and then feel better, right? Well, I didn't
Well, that's
know
one
was,
resolution.
well,
It's
you
not
know,
a
I mean,
rosy resolution, but it's one,
now,
yes.
now, just for those of you out there,
Yes.
Rosie's great. I love her. So,
Mhm.
I'm just trying to make an
Don't
example.
have, don't have everyone walking away from
Yeah, exactly. She's wonderful. This is just an example. I'm kind of
it's
trying to
okay.
paint the picture.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I use very dark ink when I paint pictures. So what happens is when you don't understand why things happen to you, when you don't understand why you feel the way you feel, you have to understand. I have fantastic
Yes.
parents,
Yes.
wonderful people. My brother, great guy. You know, somehow I managed to have friends too. I'm not quite sure how that worked, but
So
so there's
it
no
sounds
reason
like
for me to be this way.
that identifying with powerlessness when we don't understand why we feel powerless to make a change.
Well, sure, but for me, it was much more than just being powerless. It was hating
Hmm.
my existence, hating anybody else's existence. It was just, wanting to be dead,
Okay. We
just
might be
wanting to get
covering
away from it
a
all.
broad spectrum between you and I, only because, myself personally, I actually attempted suicide twice in my life, but the first time was at the age of 14. And it
Yeah.
was only because I was in circumstances of extreme domestic violence that I sort of felt I've got no other way out. So I just couldn't handle it anymore. So it was that fear that over in the family home that overrode my decision at the time. And that the second time was actually whilst I was a police officer, and I was just overcome with grief and overwhelmment and lack of any personal value, that I wasn't making a difference and my value lay outside of myself.
Hmm. Well, I
So
had no
that's
value,
right. So
zero
that's
value.
that. Yeah, I didn't have a value, but I was trying to find a value outside of myself. So that's
Right.
why I'm just asking these questions this way, because I'm trying to think, there'll be many people that will feel like as you felt. There'll be those that have felt like I felt. There'll be many that will never say anything to anybody about how they've ever felt or
Yeah.
ever entertained any of these thoughts. And I guess that's why I enjoy being, to some extent, giving a bit of vocalization about it so people know, hey, it's not, I'm not on my own. I'm not alone to actually think or feel this way. And now I actually can speak about it. And as I speak about it, I learn, oh, here's someone else who had those thoughts, and this is the way they found a solution.
Sure. Well, depression is like a fingerprint. So I don't think anybody experiences it the same. And people
Mm.
can't assume that one person's depression is worse than another's, or
Oh,
my
of course.
depression is worse than yours
Yes.
because I tried suicide at least 5 times. You only tried it
Yes.
twice. Uh, I mean,
I wasn't an overachiever.
yay, I win, I win.
I get the
But
star for underachievement.
but the thing is that when you fail at anything, you get even more down on yourself. So I kept failing
Yes.
at filling myself, and I wasn't doing it for cries of attention because no one
Yes.
ever knew
Yes.
that I was like that, and no one ever knew. I mean, my friends knew I was weird. My parents knew I had all these addictions and stuff, but they still basically knew me as a sweet guy,
Hmm.
And the point is that when you can't find a way, when I couldn't find a way to die, I had to find a way to live,
Yes.
right? And that's when I started, despite the depression, looking for things, anything that could give me some hope that I could turn this around. Because when you feel really, really, really bad, something inside told me that that's actually something to be grateful for. And when you're really, really depressed, you have a very difficult time with somebody telling you this is actually good that you feel this way because
Yeah.
it's trying to teach you something, right? Now
It
it's even
reminds me of
worse.
the Monty Python skit
Yeah,
where they had their dueling and he chops his arm off and it's like, oh, is that the best you can do? And he's still
yeah,
got the other arm and he lobs. Well, that doesn't matter. I've still got these. And
yeah. Come over here, I'll bite you in
exactly,
the knee. Yeah,
exactly. Be
yeah,
grateful.
yeah. Well, that's it. So something somehow told me that by my defining all these things as horrible and evil and terrible, and I kept thinking I was Hitler in a previous life.
Hmm.
Because this is why I deserve to be punished so horribly in this life. And, you know, I suddenly, it's funny how when you're really, really depressed, if you sit back and kind of play the third person role, where you kind of listen and watch yourself for a little bit, you can learn a lot. And one of the biggest lessons I learned was that when you interpret something as being bad, you don't learn anything from it because it's just bad. But when you
Yes, it's
interpret
the
something as
shut door.
yeah, but when you think of it as an experience, then you learn something from it, and now all of a sudden it's not necessarily bad. I have a kind of a childlike saying that goes, if I didn't feel so crappy, I couldn't be so happy.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
know,
yes, I agree. For to one extent that you can feel such depths of despair and difficulty is the other extreme of what you can spin up, of
mhm,
the extent you can feel love and appreciation and joy and well-being.
now I can. Then I couldn't.
Yes,
But the thing
right.
is that if I didn't have all those feelings of inadequacy and hatred and dread and darkness and blackness and evil and everything that was running through me all at the same time, I also had thousands of injuries, like literally thousands of injuries. I had, I broke my nose so many times, I've had people ask me where I've had it done because, it didn't look so hot in the beginning, but apparently it looks better now.
I
So,
shouldn't laugh at someone else's suffering, but that's an
well,
Aussie
no,
Aussie idiom. We
but
do
you're not
that.
laughing at suffering, and that's my
No.
point. That's my point, though.
Yes.
You're not laughing at suffering, and I'm not laughing at my suffering. Without that quote unquote what I defined then as suffering, but what I now define as experience,
Experience.
education, if you will, I could not have created the science that I created, or more accurately, innovated the science that I innovated
Yes.
in
Yes.
order to help people all over the world to help themselves in the same way that this technology helped me to help myself.
And it's the old saying, healer, heal thyself.
Yeah, not even just healer, everybody
Yeah.
has what it
Yes.
takes. It's the yin and the yang, it's the zero and the one, it's everything. If you have an issue, by nature, you already have a solution. Pain
Exactly.
is not a bad thing, pain is a good thing. I dislocated my ankle last summer, and it was excruciatingly painful. And if I felt nothing, if I felt no pain at all, I would have gotten up and
And
continued
kept
to
skiing.
walk.
Yep. Yep.
And maybe I wouldn't be able to use my leg at all now because of the
Yeah.
continued damage. The pain saved my ability to walk. If I'm running on a treadmill and I feel pain in my chest, and maybe I'm having a small heart attack, if I don't feel that pain, I keep running and I have a massive coronary and I die.
Exactly.
If
I
I,
call those things indicators. They
yeah.
indicate whether you're heading towards what you want or towards what you don't want.
Well, I call them red lights on the dashboard of your life. And if you pay attention to them, a $3 oil change can keep your engine running smoothly.
E-
Or
exactly.
you ignore it and your engine is toast, your life is toast. So, all these so called horrible things that happen to me, nobody should feel sorry for me. First of all,
Yes.
there's only the present. The past doesn't
Yes.
exist, never has, never will. The future doesn't exist, never have, never will. So, if you take care of right now, when tomorrow comes here, which will then be now, it will take care of itself.
Exactly.
That's
And
the
just to
problem.
clarify for
Yeah.
listeners that in saying that it doesn't exist, the easiest way is to say it doesn't exist in creating our reality because now is the only moment that you're impacting upon and affecting upon.
Yes, exactly.
So what has been doesn't hold relevance unless you keep regurgitating it back into the presidency. You can see where my
Yeah, you
brain's at.
have a mind that for sure.
That good old Freudian slip. You bring it back into the present, and many
Yes.
people do this. They like to talk and identify themselves by their problems, and they talk problem, 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 and the problem, and then they connect to someone else who had the similar problem, or their aunt had a problem, or their uncle had a problem, or their brother-in-law had a problem, and then they amplify it and they do that one-upmanship of all the different types of problems and then the problems of the world. And before you know it, 2 hours has passed and they're feeling pretty ordinary and pretty crappy. And they've chewed it up with that sort of stuff. And I find, people wonder why they're down in the dumps. And I say, well, if you're regurgitating it and repeating it as often as you do, I'm astounded if you can be any other way. So if we think 60,000 thoughts a day, and many of those thoughts are preoccupied with the words that we speak, and they tend to say women speak a little bit more than men, it
Uh,
it might be one of those indicators of where we're heading towards what we want or what we don't want, that we have that opportunity to identify that red light, as you mentioned, of what's happening in our lives and pay attention. Do I want more of this? Do I want to keep speaking about it? Or do I want more of this? And I just want to share the card. I'm chosen for this program to draw a card from the Abraham series because I love Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham, and the content and messages and information that's shared that empower so many people. And at the start of every program, I draw out a card, and today's was the what if card. What if everything was always working out for me? And I thought that is a lovely perspective, which is where you and I are taking people on this journey today with what you've been innovative within creating something that will be working out.
You know, interestingly enough, with what you had just mentioned, statistics are showing that every time you say something negative out loud, you have between 500 and 5,000 negative thoughts that are inspired by that one statement outside. So, you know, carrying over your 60,000 thoughts a day.
For the slower models.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot to think. You know, affirmations really work well, don't they?
They do, but again, it's I say you can't, slap a happy face on the empty petrol gauge and go, well, she's all well and good. When you don't feel well and good, your feelings are a larger indicator of what you've got going on. So denial is not going to win that race. So that's where, and for myself in my own situation, I know when I used your tools, I had about 7 large events on at the time that on a stress factor scale, they were classified as 9 out of 10. So then multiply that by 7, all occurring at once. All my bank accounts were emptied. My child had been in critical care. We were homeless in 2 countries. And, I had no one to turn to at that time. And that's why, and I was a private person. I didn't like to share publicly, like yourself, anything that was going on about me that wasn't empowering or supportive. So I tend to hide and be like go into my shell when those events are happening. And I guess I'm hoping I'm like the butterfly that I move out from being a slug and emerge with wings. And in this case, with the advance of what you shared with me, I was able to do that together with some other practical strategies that I'll share on other programs. But right now, I really want to get towards your brain entrainment that you've been led through your personal experiences to develop. So what was your background that started you to look towards this solution?
My background was the fact that I hated life and I couldn't find a way to die, so I had to find a way to live.
So you didn't have a background in music or digital?
No, I have a small background in psychology and sociology. I have a minor degree in sociology from York University in Toronto, and I have an honors degree in psychology from the same university as well. But that's pretty low end stuff. You can't do anything professionally with those degrees. You have to keep going, if you want to do something with them legally or, so I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a self-help guru either. I'm a scientist. I'm a neuroscientist. What happened for me was as I was going through my sufferings, I was trying to figure out a way to understand what was happening to me. And as I picked apart my life, I realized that I don't have the traditional excuses. I wasn't a battered child. My parents love each other. I was brutalized by other kids, growing up. Often funny, I don't remember a lot of it, but my mom would tell me that it was pretty much routine for me to be in a fight with about 20 guys at the same time. Have 10 or 15 guys jump me all at the same time. And I'm sure I was probably asking for it too.
I was going to say, I think that anger might have been underlying.
But
it shows
back then
guys.
I didn't understand. I thought everybody thought like that and was going through. To be honest, until I was like 30 or so, I thought everybody, I really didn't say anything to anybody about any of this stuff until after I started healing. Because I just thought everybody goes through this. And I'm nothing, unusual for the average person or average human being. So for me, it was a case of understanding. And when I, kind of like Sherlock Holmes says, once you've eliminated everything else, whatever's left, regardless of how unlikely, is probably the truth. Well, all that was left because as I'm studying about why I'm feeling this way, I'm learning about neurochemistry, things like endorphins and
Hmm.
hormones and neurotransmitters and how they
And
interact with
neuropeptides, and
cells.
every thought we
Well,
release, we have releases a chemical cocktail.
yeah, exactly. I call it a soup.
Yep,
And depending on who you are, some people make tasty soups and other people make soups that taste like dishwater. And I was very
exactly.
good at making them taste like dishwater. So I went through all of this and I kind of got an understanding that I have no legitimate reason to feel this way. And yet I do. And I
Mm,
can't stop it. And I would read, I took programs like by the Hicks and by Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra and pretty much everybody out there,
yes,
and I
yes.
got absolutely nowhere with any of them, and it wasn't
Hmm.
any of their fault. It really wasn't. I just got nowhere with them. I picked up little bits of experience through using these things, and they all kind of merged together to help to create what I call now the Morry method.
Yes.
And, you know, I think when a lot of people do these programs, they expect these programs to cure them or to make them happier or to make them healthier. And I think what they really are is just lessons that we need to apply to take care of ourselves.
Sometimes people fail to realize that what's the common denominator to every single problem I have in my life?
Me.
Oh, that would be me.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yet I'm trying to fix my problems. It's not about fixing the problems. And it's not even about fixing me. I think for myself, what I identify, I'm really simple as an ex-cop. We look at identifying those bloody useless thoughts and rectifying them. And with an emotional scale, if you're at the level of depression and apathy, that just a little bit above that is a level of anger and rage. And a little bit above that feeling better is a little bit of frustration, and above that
Yep.
starts to be feelings of relief, and as you work up is some more feelings of freedom. So it could be like dialing up and dialing down in where you spend the greatest level of your attention, which is what you speak about, what you listen to, what you're continually reading, what you're filling yourself up on. And if you're filling yourself up with things that aren't fulfilling, it's an indicator that our perception, our window through which we view the world, isn't working for us. So I guess that's what's good, that you identified that, even though they may be relevant fixes to other people, at that time it certainly wasn't a relevant fix for yourself. So it doesn't mean give up. It means keep looking.
Well, it's tough to keep looking though when you're depressed. And I
I
actually
agree.
figured out, or actually I had a very instinctive gut feeling that for me, I have no legitimate emotional reason to feel the way I feel. So if I don't, then why do I feel this way? And
Yes.
as I was alluding to, brain chemistry became my answer. So I thought,
Yes.
okay, I'm having all these negative thoughts, and I was developing my theory that the thoughts create. I mean, it's no secret that thoughts create brainwave activity. It's
Exactly.
not the other way around. But what happens is brainwave activity actually creates neurochemistry.
Yes.
And this is something that I found out. So I thought, okay, that's when I started getting involved with everybody else's techniques, because I thought, okay, if I can change my thoughts, that would naturally change my chemistry because the thoughts are creating the chemistry. And to me, that's what the cycle of my depression was, and really everybody's, as far as I'm concerned. Enough things happen that you define as bad in a row that you start to expect bad things. When you start to expect them, you look for them. When you look for them,
Yes.
you see them. They create, you interpret it as bad again. It creates negative, what I call negative chemistry. The negative chemistry creates more negative thoughts, more negative chemistry, and there you are. You're in your cycle. So I was reading all these
Yes.
people and I was practicing all of their techniques, and nothing was getting me anywhere. And I was getting even more depressed because, oh, come on, I'm so sure that I'm onto something here, and yet it's not working. So I thought, well, maybe there's something I haven't tried yet, and it's kind of like a key that can help everything else amalgamate into something that could help me. And eventually, I came across some companies and some people talking about brainwave entrainment, because I certainly didn't create it. This is where my innovation
Yes.
comes in. So I tried the entrainment, and when I discovered it, of course, I'm terrified of it because, oh, it affects brainwaves, it does this, and I'm on a knife's edge to begin with.
And so
Okay.
people can understand, there are several brainwaves, like we have theta, delta, alpha, beta, so that when you're conscious and your lips are moving, that's when we're in that beta state. And we've all heard of alpha dogs, so we can relate to what state that is. So these ones that, and the greatest activity, as I understand, where we get our greatest results are sort of in the theta state,
That's
and
not exactly
delta's good for
true.
sleeping. No?
That's not
Well, please
exactly
correct me.
true. No, there's a lot of generalizations that are out there by
Yes, and that's
people.
what I was doing, is just a
Yeah,
generalization, because we only have a short period of time
yeah.
to sort of
But in
just to give a
reality,
working understanding of
right.
different brainwaves.
But in reality, what happens is we were created eons ago, and our brains are essentially, they're more complicated now, but essentially they're the same as they were. They were designed to produce certain chemistry in order to function optimally. Back then, all we did was live in a cave, go to the washroom, have sex, hunt, forage, and sleep. And then we'd get up and do it all over again. Believe it or not, that's a lot less stressful than the lives we have now. We do not have the opportunity to experience brainwave activity that would be dominant for long enough to create the amount of chemistry we need naturally, the way our brains are designed to function healthfully. And this, in my opinion, is why so many people have so many problems, because their brains are not functioning in a, it's like you're beta dominant for 2 seconds, then you're alpha dominant, you're theta. We're talking, and we're beta, maybe
Yes.
beta. I would say I'm more alpha E right now, but people make that thing that, oh, I'm in beta because I'm awake and alert. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true. You actually have delta frequencies flying around in your head as well. And you have theta, and you have gamma, and you have, everything alpha. You have everything floating around. It, like when you say you're in a state, you assume you're in a dominant state, which means out of the
Exactly.
billions of brain cells you have, most of them, or a preponderance of them, actually are more or less in the same frequency range. And
Exactly.
even that isn't necessarily true. But as you said, we don't really have time to go beyond that.
No, we're just
However,
working generalizations.
right. So when we're talking a generalization of the brainwave activity, and we relate it back to depression or other thoughts, especially repetitive negative thoughts, what happens is the chemistry creates the negative thoughts. I was reading all these books, practicing all these things, and nothing was helping me because the chemistry was perpetuating the negative thoughts. I could not change my thought patterns because the process was too powerful. And I was just about to give up and resign myself to living in hatred and disgust and pain for the rest of my life, however long that would last, when all of a sudden it hit me, if I can't change my thoughts, what if I could change my brainwave activity? If I could change my activity, wouldn't that change what I'm thinking? Because I've already come up with this idea, this concept that negative thinking creates negative chemistry, quote unquote negative chemistry. That chemistry perpetuates more negative thoughts, which then creates more negative chemistry. So if I have those negative thoughts, but the next stage I change the chemistry, and the way to change the chemistry, of course, is by changing the brainwave activity, then would that change my thinking? And that was really my last gasp, and it worked.
Or allow the opportunity to be receptive to another mode of thinking that created
Well, what it does
different
is it
results.
changes the way your brain works, the way your mind thinks is purely based on stimulus and response. You experience a stimulus, you decide, is it good or bad? You decide how good, how bad, what kind of good, what kind of bad. You go through a whole series of nano questions that happen like that, like the snap of a finger. And
Well, I was going to say, most of us don't even decide. It's already been determined for us.
No, it isn't
at a much earlier age.
You actually do decide.
Ah.
It's totally a decision. And when that decision can be a reflex, like you said, that is learned response.
Yes.
However, you can change that if you change the chemistry. So when we interrupt the flow of that thought process, creating the quote unquote negative chemistry, and we change the chemistry to something stable that the brain needs and is naturally designed for, all of a sudden, when people were talking to me, before it was like I was the Simpsons dog. All I would hear is blah, 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 blah. After all, how could anyone understand me? How can anyone understand someone who wakes up every morning wanting to see a nuclear holocaust? So I wasn't listening to
Yes.
anyone. I didn't even hear them. Suddenly, without any effort on my part at all, just from listening regularly, all of a sudden, when people are talking, I'm hearing them and I'm understanding them and I'm listening and my mind is opening. And this isn't me making a practice or doing exercises or doing
Exactly.
affirmations. This is just my brain's natural way of being when it is in a more healthful state. Well, amazingly enough, the more I did it, the better I felt, the longer the results lasted for. Now I listen to the entrainment probably, well, I actually listen every day, but I could probably get away with listening once or twice a week and maintain my attitude
Yes.
and the way I'm feeling. And yet, I also discovered through all my research that we all have brains and all of our brains work exactly the same way. We may
There might
not,
be an argument from a few people there, but anyway,
well, believe,
jellyfish apparently have them too, I'm
yeah,
told.
well, jellyfish live forever also. I don't know if any of us really want to live forever, but
Uh,
that's the point. The point is that once you understand something, you lose the fear of it and you can take steps around it. So I kind of developed this whole scientific process, and it turns out that I tried it with a few people that I knew, and they of course told me it was great, but I think they were just supporting me. So
mm,
without telling me, they gave it to some of their friends who then called me out of the blue and told me, I don't know you, but I know your friend Bob, and he gave me this recording you made, and I cannot tell you the difference it has made in my life. And it just grew from there. I started researching more and more. You have to understand that on top of all this hatred and everything else, by the time I was 35, almost 40 years old, I was over $250,000 in debt, earning about $100 American a month.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
So being
So
quite
there was
challenged.
everything. Yeah. But
And
now
I'll
it's,
just explain for listeners, the brain entrainment that I know that I utilized at the time, the way I explain it to people, and you can certainly correct me for my inaccuracies, is it was like for me, I explain it as binaural beats that I hear in my ears, which is like, and what it did for me, because I'm listening to it for 30 minutes before going to sleep at a time when I let my body relax, because prior to listening, my thoughts would be filled with, how am I going to pay for it? Where am I going to get it? How am I going to do? I can't believe it. And it was all overwhelming stuff that I didn't have answers for, and it wouldn't let me sleep. So when I used the headphones and listened to or whatever it was, it
yeah.
interrupted my pattern of thoughts. So I simply bought myself 30 minutes of time that I didn't have those thoughts. And that 30 minutes of time was enough for me, who's had a life of the exact reverse. I've always looked for what works better. I've always thought, what if everything does work out? I've been accused of tiptoeing through the tulips many times, and especially as a police officer, when I face crime, corruption, devastation, I've been in all sorts of environments that no human being really should be in, yet I've always maintained a much more optimistic outlook, and I've always had the results to back it up and prove it too, until this period where just too many things imploded at once. And that 30 minutes of relief allowed me to then actually fall asleep. And so when I woke up in the morning, I actually had the mindset on of, okay, what if everything was actually always working out for me? What is it that I can do today? And I actually was able to take those steps forward. So after about 2 months, I actually didn't need to use it anymore. And I was back on my feet within a 3-month period. So it worked super effectively and quickly for me, just by recreating, for example, a new neural pathway by I understand binaural beats that they operate
Okay, I want to just
out of
clarify
sync.
something. Can I
Yep.
just, I don't mean
Yeah,
to
jump
interrupt you,
in
but you've said binaural beats twice now.
twice.
Binaural beats
Yes.
are useless.
Okay. So
Completely useless. Please do not say that I use binaural beats.
I won't then.
I
But
mean,
that was my
I am on
understanding of
record.
brain entrainment. So
No,
I'm
no,
really
no,
glad
no, no, no,
because
no.
I thought it was different beats operating on your right and your left brain, and that your brains
Uh,
attempted to harmonize the two beats, and that's
no,
what created more electrical activity across the brain.
no, that's totally
Okay.
wrong.
Well,
Sorry.
please
completely wrong.
Please correct me now, and we've got about 5
binaural beats
minutes.
are based, I'll be very quick. Binaural beats are based on flawed research from like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Totally flawed research. It's good for diagnosing certain brain anomalies, like when the left hemisphere isn't communicating with the right hemisphere. But other than that, and maybe for some disassociation, which in itself has value, but certainly not the value of entrainment. I use monaural or isochronic tones. The tones actually occur outside your head. For brainwave entrainment to occur, you cannot have the tones being synthesized inside your head. It is not a strong enough signal. Even though it sounds like ba 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 ba, it isn't accomplishing entrainment at all. I had just absolutely everything else you said, wonderful, but please don't associate me with binaural beats.
Oh, I won't. I'll cast that word out of my vocabulary. It's gone with the word lack.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. It's the original form of what they used to call entrainment. And a lot of companies still use them because they started off using them and they don't want to refund billions of dollars in profits. So they keep using them. But they're really not effective.
That your technology that you did create, this innovative sound waves, would I call them that?
It's really the technique
result in brain entrainment. Well, that technique was trialled on, I believe you had the results come in from the Brazilian government that trialled it on the soldiers and discovered it had great results on post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as depression, as well as chronic injuries. So that's what I really want to make sure that listeners hear and get an opportunity to access from you today, because that's what I found so great, and I use it anytime. As soon as I get caught up, it's the first thing I go back to, because I don't have to do anything. I can just relax and plug in, and for me, that's perfect healthcare.
Well, that's all anybody has to do. That, you see, as I alluded to earlier, it wasn't the Hicks problem or Deepak Chopra's problem or Wayne Dyer's problem that they weren't helping me. They were teaching me stuff, and I expected them just to do it for me. Read their book and I'm going to be perfect. They don't tell you really how to apply things, and maybe that's
it's a practice, and that's the bit that I understand, is because I use a simple dial that I can either dial up the appreciation, and when I dial up appreciation, I've automatically by default dialed down the drama. If I dial up the drama, I've automatically, by default, dialed down the appreciation. Now, I can only have one or the other. It's like being a little bit pregnant. I got to pick which one I am. There isn't an in-between. So if you are in that state of appreciation, milk it to the max, because those juices then flow. If you're not in that state of appreciation, 2 seconds thought on it, or a minute's thought, as opposed to 24 hours of the rest of the time you're spewing out chemical juices, is not going to be overwhelming enough. So that's where I think it's the practice that people forget. They automatically assume, right, I read that, I did that, that was useless. It's like, well, how much practice did you put to it? It's like playing piano. To be a master pianist is that, you don't sit there for 2 seconds or 10 minutes and go, well, that didn't help me any. It's the fact that it's a daily practice. It's a daily being. It's a daily energy that we're focused in, one that either feels good or one that feels bad. If it feels bad, it's a good indicator to do something to change it.
See, I could only motivate myself to lie down. That was it. I couldn't, I was tired of doing exercises and methods and trying to meditate and all these other things. I just couldn't do it. It was
so
too
on
hard
the Morry method, how long did you find it took for you to create a change within yourself?
I started noticing some changes like almost immediately, but the real changes for me, probably after about a year, I started noticing serious changes. Before then, I had this instinct like things were getting better, and I felt better while I was listening and for a number of minutes, hours, sometimes after listening. Mm-hmm. So I was getting relief, and I was, and I've never had relief before. So
that's that key word, relief. I think that's a key word that many people in their lives today, if they get the opportunity to find relief, because it's in that window of relief that you can plant the seeds for change.
You regenerate when you're sleeping, right?
Yes.
Sleep is can be a form of relief when you actually sleep well.
Or you
And
marinate.
yeah, well, that's
You
the thing.
marinate in the toxic stuff.
Well, think about it. When you're in delta, that's where the body heals, and that's where the mind has a chance to heal too. So
Yes.
if while you're awake, you don't experience delta as a dominant frequency, so you heal less. I don't know if you know this or not, but elderly people have less delta when they sleep than when they're younger. And that's one theory that exists as to why it takes the elderly longer to heal.
And I wonder which elderly they tested and discovered this on, because I know a lot within China that are phenomenal and don't have our illnesses.
Yeah,
And
these are all
again,
North American studies.
exactly. I think that's where it becomes limited. When I challenge when people throw out statistics, it's like they never ask me, where's my statistic in that? So it's like I watched a program recently to do with, afterlife experiences. And my son was sitting there next to me and he's going, calm down, mum, calm down, as he's stroking my hand. Because I thought they've got such a limited biased perspective that they're
Yeah.
sharing for all the world to learn from. And that's a person's education, watching that and going, right, well, we know all there is to know about that. No, there's always more. And that's what I love about what you're sharing with the
That's what I
Morry
love about
method.
your philosophy. Because you know what? Everybody out there has to understand one thing, and one thing more importantly than anything else. You have all the power you need to make yourself well, to make yourself happy, to make yourself successful, whatever you want. You have all the power. Don't give it to other people, because that's
Exactly.
where the mistake happens. Just make a
Exactly.
choice and you can do anything you want to do. Every single one of you is important. Every single one of you is necessary. You're all like cells of the same organism. We're all cells of the same organism, the body of humankind, if you will. And we're all important to its
And if
survival.
and if only people could be made to see how extraordinary that they actually truly are on a moment by moment basis, they would be astounded in no time at all on just how astounding and truly awesome, that common word I hear in America, that they really, really are. There is so much that is unlimited, that is unseen, that is unstoppable, that is immortal, but we keep classifying it as unreal. And we get caught up and think this is what's real, this hardship, this difficulty, this stuck in place, this I'm mortal, and this different grounded mindset. It's that shades of black that we were
Well said.
talking about. And I challenge people to just play with the idea, what if everything was always working out for me? And to give them a head start, where would you like to send them so they can learn more about the Morry method and maybe get access to trialing some of your wonderful material?
Well, they can look me up on the internet, Morry Zelcovitch. They can go to themorrymethod.com. My website is actually being redone right now, so I've put up an older version. They
Yep.
can call me if they want. My phone number is on my website. No problem.
Great. And we'll spell just so it's Morry and Zelcovitch, Zelcovitch.
Well
And
done.
I want to say thank you so much, Morry, for coming on today and sharing your wonderful, innovative creation that certainly impacted positively upon my life. And I know it's going to impact positively on many, many more lives to come.
Been my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I can't tell you how grateful I am. Thank you.
Great. And for listeners, you've been listening to Until Now with Rosie Pekar. For more motivation and inspiration, even though Morry didn't get much out of Hinks and a few others, he didn't try kick butt at the time. And butt is
Yeah.
not that butt that you sit on. It's the butt in your head that I say stops you dead. So every time you say I could do that, but what follows is that bloody useless thought. So if you are after more inspiration and motivation after this program, please go to www.kickbutt, that's KICKBUT, only one T, or you'll go somewhere else and I don't know what you're going to get, .com.au, because I am Australian. And there's lots more audio to keep you busy and actively engaged and finding relief. And just as I'm closing, I'm going to share the rest of this card from Esther Hicks, that she said, what if everything was always working out for me, as a focus as you go to sleep tonight, if you haven't accessed the Morry method to be able to utilize to get you by in the meantime. I'm going to read you what she shared, which is, when you play the what if game, look for things that make you feel better. There is never a situation in which there is not a way out. But That bloody useless thought. Out of habit, she didn't say that. That's my editing. Out of habit, most people continue to choose the lack perspective until they eventually find themselves where it seems that there are no more choices. But as you hold to your intention to look for evidence of well-being and thriving and success and happiness, you will tune yourself to the vibrations of those things. And so those kinds of good feeling experiences will dominate your life. Let good feelings dominate your life. Until next week, you've been listening to Until Now with Rosie Pekar. Enjoy your election results, everybody.